Please excuse me, my voice is a little hoarse. Act number one of terrorism.
Who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline?
I don't want to get our country in trouble, so I won't answer it. But I can tell you who it wasn't, was Russia. How about when they blamed Russia? You know, they said Russia blew up their own pipeline. You got a kick out of that one, too. It wasn't Russia. So I won't answer the question only because I don't want to get our country any deeper than they already are.
The Russian economy is vulnerable. 80% of Russian exports are in oil, gas, and minerals. You want to depend more on the North American energy platform, the tremendous bounty of oil and gas that we're finding in North America. You want to have pipelines that don't go through Ukraine and Russia.
No one would buy expensive American gas as long as cheap Russian gas existed, so the United States simply killed off the alternative to create a captive market.
There will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
Blowing up the Nord Stream pipelines, the US didn't just hurt Russia, it also turned Europe into a permanent US client. The cheap gas was gone forever, and Europe was now forced to buy American LNG at 10 times the price. This greatly benefited US corporations and helped secure the US dollar for the time being against BRICS de-dollarization and the multipolar world, as governments were now forced to get rid of their euros to the point they became more worthless for the first time in 20 years than US dollars. The US went from supplying just 9% of Europe's energy before Ukraine to being Europe's #1 source of coal, oil, and LNG. Not just at Russia's expense, but eating half of Qatar's LNG share in the process. After the United States, Australia, closely followed by Qatar, are the world's largest suppliers of LNG and America's biggest competitors. But the US is now at full export capacity. They can't physically ship enough of their own gas to satisfy the market that they just cleared. The empire realized that they didn't actually need to build more infrastructure to win. They just needed to delete the competition. Again.
More terrorist acts.
Just as Washington used the cover of the Ukraine war, sanctions, and the Nord Stream bombings to force Russia out of Europe, they similarly used the cover of the Iran war to finish off Qatar's position as a global LNG player. By forcing Qatar to declare force majeure and then triggering the retaliatory strikes on Ras Laffan, Washington took the world's largest gas field out of the picture, crippling Iran and sidelining Qatar in one fell swoop. There is no doubt the US and Israel provoked this because they had spent, up until this point, 3 weeks bombing Iran, gauging their responses, and Iran had made it explicitly clear that it was now an eye for an eye. This move allowed the United States to hit 3 birds with 1 stone. By crippling, even partially, Qatar's LNG capacity, they forced them to cancel their cheap long-term contracts.
Cancel them. Force them. You hear these words?
While the US remains shielded, this sent LNG prices soaring, forcing Europe and Asia to bid on the spot market for US gas at exorbitant prices, and would position the US as seemingly the only reliable supplier of energy in an unstable world.
Straight jacking.
Then, out of nowhere, at the first Board of Peace Summit, we see an oil and gas rig slapped right on the corporate advertisements of New Gaza. This, coupled with the timing of Israel's gas deal and the fact that only Chevron operate in this area, lead.
Only Chevron can operate. Only Chevron has been moving
us to the only logical conclusion that they plan on robbing the gas fields in the Gaza Marine. In the meantime, the US plan to topple the Syrian government had finally worked out, so Chevron wasted no time in moving on Syria's oil and gas, laying the groundwork for yet another energy deal in the Levantine Basin just 8 weeks after their takeover of Gaza's resources.
Who are the terrorists? This is all criminal. You understand that, right? Our news won't tell you how we have been blowing up ships all around the world.
Why Donald Trump wants Greenland and Canada so much. And it would immediately look to Russia to replace that oil. So they moved that same fleet to the North Atlantic in order to cut them off. As a matter of fact, during the last months, the United States and their allies began systematically hunting down Russian oil and gas ships, not just in the North Atlantic, but across the entire planet. Particularly after the war in Iran began, we've seen an uptick in Russian tankers and LNG ships being blown up or pirated all the way from the Caribbean to the North Atlantic, to the Mediterranean, to the Black Sea, Baltic Sea. This explains why Donald Trump wants Greenland and
All those places we bombed pirated ships illegally.
Canada so much, and why the Royal Navy deployed a carrier strike group just last month to the Greenland, Iceland, UK corridor.
We need Greenland.
The goal is to target Russian tankers and fuel ships and corner them in the Baltic and the Arctic corridor before they're even able to leave. During the last weeks, we haven't just seen the largest amount of attacks on Russian ships, but also on Russian refineries and export hubs, including Russia's 3 primary Western export hubs and several of their top refineries. As a result, around 40% of Russia's seaborne oil export capacity.
We pay Ukraine to do that. You see how this works? We get other little countries to do our dirty work.
While these strikes were officially claimed by Ukraine, they could have only been carried out with US backing, permission, and equipment.
Are you keeping count of the terrorist act? Here's another
While
one.
the United States allowed a single Russian tanker to reach Cuba and issued a 30-day reprieve for Iranian and Russian oil, these shouldn't be mistaken for signs of de-escalation. They are only meant as pressure valves designed to stabilize the US dollar and global markets just enough in order to prevent a world war while Washington complete the hostile takeover. Following the strikes on the Ras Laffan refinery, the planet lost 20% of its LNG supply, which came from Qatar. Then, by some astronomical stroke of luck, Australia, the planet's second largest LNG supplier, is hit by a cyclone, taking half its hubs offline with shutdowns expected to last several weeks. Whether one buys that story or not, the result is the same. In the span of just 9 days, the United States' 2 largest competitors were taken off the board, sending LNG prices soaring for Europe and Asia.
We did that. The gas prices you see, we did that.
Loose lips, tight sanctions, whole world watching the tantrum. Talk big from a gold top mansion, but you can't bomb your way to an answer. Loose lips, tight sanctions, real lives under those captions. Talk boy like it's just transactions, but you can't bomb your way to an answer.
With the big U.S. military buildup that had occurred, there was an assumption that there would be some form of military action.
One of the tenets of that America First policy was no new wars. And now he started a war.
Everyone in this region, including the Gulf states, had underestimated the scale and the breadth of the Iranian response.
The president campaigned as a candidate in 2024 as someone who upheld the America First policy.
Intended consequences of pursuing a war without a clear objective.
The biggest political thorn in his side, at least as far as his base is concerned, is the Jeffrey Epstein files. But Iran has the potential to be high up on that list, potentially equal with that. There's the economic risk, which then has a potential impact on the elections as well. And that is, if the fallout from this war leads to higher oil prices, and that translates to higher gasoline prices, then that takes away a really, really important talking point for President Trump that will hurt his chances of maintaining Republican control.
Making things more expensive, involved in foreign wars, pretty much 2 of his biggest campaign promises. The important question, though, is, are they turning on Trump because he is disappointing them, or are they turning on Trump because it's a reflection of what their viewers want? If these MAGA commentators are reflecting the feelings of their viewers, especially someone like Joe Rogan, who has millions, tens of millions of viewers, there's going to be a big problem for Trump and a really big problem for the Republican Party.